The courtroom is silent, save for the low hum of whispers in the background. A high-profile case, a national stage. The air is thick with tension. The clock ticks, each second echoing like a drumbeat of inevitability. At the center of the room stands Jasmine Crockett, her back straight, eyes steely with purpose. She's dressed for battle, every inch the embodiment of dignity and resilience. Her stance commands attention. She isn't just in the room, she owns it. Across from her, on the opposite side of the courtroom, sits Judge X. The gavel rests lightly in his hand, but his demeanor is anything but calm. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixate on Jasmine with an unmistakable sense of superiority. He is the epitome of power, someone used to bending the room to his will. He leans back in his chair, confident, dismissive, until now. Jasmine steps forward, her voice cutting through the room with precision, every word deliberate, aimed at exposing the truth. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The facts don't lie. She pauses, letting the weight of her words settle, challenging the very foundation of the judge's stance. The room shifts, a subtle but undeniable change in the air as the onlookers lean forward. Judge X's lips curl into a smirk, his voice dripping with condescension. Ms. Crockett, he begins, his tone low and mocking, I understand your passion, but your arguments, he gestures dismissively, are hardly persuasive. The audience holds its breath, waiting. Jasmine doesn't flinch. She stands tall, unwavering. Her next words come not just as a rebuttal, but as a declaration. It's not passion, Judge, it's justice. And I'll be damned if I let you deny that. A tense silence falls over the courtroom. Judge X's gaze falters for a moment, as if taken aback by the boldness of her response. There's a flicker in his eyes, a brief moment of doubt. The courtroom is suddenly divided. One side, representing power and tradition, the other, standing for truth and change. But what happened next? Jasmine continues, her voice gaining strength, was something no one saw coming. The room holds its collective breath, waiting for the moment that will define the case, the trial, and perhaps even the course of justice itself. The gavel falls. The sound, sharp and final, echoes through the room, but the tension in the air remains thick. Jasmine Crockett's words linger, hanging like a challenge no one has dared to make before. Judge X's smirk falters, but he quickly recovers, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing. This is not the time or the place for theatrics, Ms. Crockett, he declares, attempting to regain control of the courtroom. But the damage has already been done. The room, once dominated by his authority, is now on the edge of its seat, waiting for the next move. Jasmine stands tall, undeterred by his attempt to undermine her. She knows this moment is more than just about the case. It's about something much bigger. It's about the people who have been silenced for too long. It's about the marginalized voices, the ones who have had their justice denied for generations. She knows that every word she speaks now will echo beyond these walls. This case, these arguments, they're not just about legal precedents. They're about reclaiming dignity for the oppressed, for the forgotten. This case, she begins, her voice steady but full of conviction, is not just about the defendant. It's about every single person whose rights have been trampled by those in power who think they are untouchable. It's about the injustice that has festered in this system for far too long. The courtroom falls into a stunned silence. Her words are no longer just a legal defense. They are a call to action. Her gaze sweeps across the room, making sure every person in that courtroom, whether they support her or not, feels the weight of what she's saying. Judge X clears his throat, the control he once had slipping from his grasp. He looks around the courtroom, perhaps realizing, for the first time, that he's no longer the unquestioned authority here. You're getting personal, Ms. Crockett, he warns, his voice tinged with annoyance. But Jasmine isn't swayed. Justice isn't personal, Judge, she shoots back, her eyes unwavering. It's universal. It's for everyone who's been told their voice doesn't matter. It's for every family who's had to fight for what is rightfully theirs. It's for those who still believe in a system that protects them, even when the system itself has turned its back. The room stirs. People are shifting in their seats. Some are nodding along. Others are on edge. But one thing is certain. Jasmine has shifted the momentum. She has taken the fight out of the judge's hands and placed it back where it belongs, with the people. The stakes are higher than you think, Your Honor, she continues, her voice gaining strength. This isn't just about one case. This is about the future of our justice system. This is about the very soul of our nation. And I will not let it be corrupted any longer. A murmur ripples through the audience. The weight of her words begins to sink in, and Judge X knows, in that moment, that this is no longer just a legal battle. This is a fight for the heart of justice itself. Jasmine's gaze locks with Judge X's, and for the first time, he doesn't look so sure of himself. "You may have the gavel, Judge," she says, her voice low but fierce, "but I have the truth." The room holds its breath, and the world outside watches, knowing that what happens next will not just determine the fate of this case, but may very well change the course of history. Judge X has been a fixture in the courtroom for over 2 decades. His name is synonymous with power, control, and, at times, controversy. To the untrained eye, he is a man of composure, stoic, calculating, and commanding the respect of everyone around him. But beneath the polished exterior, behind the robe that symbolizes authority, is a man who has long used his position to manipulate the scales of justice to his favor. It wasn't always this way. There was a time when Judge X started out with ideals. A younger version of him, fresh out of law school, was idealistic, eager to make a difference. He once spoke about bringing fairness and integrity to the bench. His early rulings were celebrated, his legal mind sharp, his sense of right and wrong clear. He was seen as a rising star in the legal community, a voice of reason in a world full of corruption. But somewhere along the way, somewhere in the years spent behind the gavel, Judge X lost his way. He became intoxicated with the power that came with his title, the influence that his position granted him. He began to make decisions not based on the law, but on who stood before him. Power brokers, political donors, the wealthy elite, they all knew the unspoken truth. Judge X could be bought. He had a price, and with every case, with every decision, he edged closer to the precipice. Over the years, Judge X had built a reputation not just as a legal authority, but as a man who played by his own rules. He was known for favoring the powerful, for delivering verdicts that aligned with the interests of the politically connected. It wasn't just about legal precedent for him. It was about who could get to him, who could grease the wheels. He became a man who believed that the law was something to be bent, manipulated, and contorted to serve his own interests. And everyone knew it. But what was once whispered in backrooms had now come to a head in front of the entire nation. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just fighting for a case. She was fighting for the dismantling of a system that allowed people like Judge X to operate unchecked, unchallenged, and unafraid of the consequences. In private, Judge X often mocked those who tried to challenge him. He would chuckle at the thought of someone like Jasmine, an up-and-coming lawyer, an outsider, stepping into his courtroom and thinking they could expose him for what he really was. He had built his empire with such care and precision that no one, no matter how idealistic or righteous, could touch him. Or so he thought. Behind closed doors, his colleagues knew the truth. They knew how he would twist the law to suit his needs, how he would selectively apply rulings based on who was sitting across from him at the bench. Yet, for years, they stayed silent, complicit in his quiet corruption. They were just as much a part of the system as he was, benefiting from his decisions, turning a blind eye to the consequences for those who stood in opposition. Judge X was proud of his influence, proud of the deals he had struck and the power he wielded. He walked the halls of the courthouse with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, knowing that his decisions shaped the very fabric of society. But deep down, even he knew that his reign couldn't last forever. The cracks in his armor were starting to show, and Jasmine Crockett had just begun to chip away at them. Every ruling he had made in the past few months had become more erratic, more defensive, more laced with undertones of desperation. The accusations, the rumors, they were beginning to catch up with him. But what really frightened Judge X wasn't the whispers behind closed doors. It was the idea that someone might finally have the courage to stand up and expose him for what he truly was, a corrupt judge who had long forgotten his duty to justice. And Jasmine Crockett, she wasn't just some naive lawyer looking to make a name for herself. She was different. She was everything Judge X had never taken seriously. She had something he couldn't buy: integrity, unshakable belief in what was right, and an unwavering dedication to her cause. As Jasmine's words cut through the courtroom, Judge X felt the creeping sensation of fear that he had never experienced before. This wasn't just another lawyer trying to impress the jury. This was a woman who had the power to do what no one else had dared to do: bring him down. And though he would never admit it, the thought terrified him. Jasmine Crockett wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be standing in this courtroom, challenging the very system that had been built to keep people like her out. Raised in the heart of a working-class neighborhood, Jasmine had seen firsthand the kind of injustices that the powerful could inflict on the vulnerable. Her family was a mosaic of immigrants, fighters, and dreamers who had come to America hoping for a better life. But they quickly realized that the American dream wasn't as accessible as the textbooks promised. Her father, an immigrant from Nigeria, worked long hours as a bus driver to provide for his family. Her mother, a nurse, spent nights stitching up the wounds of those who could barely afford the medical bills. Despite their struggles, they never stopped believing in the promise of equality and opportunity. But when Jasmine was in her teens, that belief was shaken to its core. One night, her father was caught in a routine traffic stop, pulled over for no reason, asked to step out of the car. The officer said it was for a simple random check, but Jasmine's father knew the truth. He had been pulled over because of his skin color. He had been harassed and belittled for no reason other than the color of his skin and the fact that his car didn't match the stereotype of an affluent American citizen. The incident left Jasmine furious, but more than that, it left her determined. Her parents had always encouraged her to use her voice, to never let injustice slide without calling it out. But that night, Jasmine made a vow to herself. She would be the one to challenge the system. She would be the one to use the law as a weapon for good. So, she threw herself into her studies. A scholarship to a prestigious law school was just the beginning. She knew that education was the key, but she also knew that getting into the system was one thing. Changing it was another. It was the first of many battles she would fight, not just with legal precedents and statutes, but with the very structures that kept people like her family at the bottom. The road wasn't easy. Jasmine faced obstacles at every turn. She had to navigate the toxic blend of systemic racism and gender bias that permeated her legal education. Professors who would speak over her in class, colleagues who questioned her intellect simply because of her background, everyday battles that would have broken a lesser person. But Jasmine didn't back down. Each setback only fueled her desire to prove them wrong. She fought harder, studied longer, and found mentors who saw her potential beyond her race or gender. She never forgot where she came from, and she never let it define her. She found herself rising through the ranks, speaking at rallies, organizing events, and slowly carving out a reputation as a tenacious, brilliant, and fearless advocate for those without a voice. It wasn't enough for her to simply represent clients. She wanted to change the game entirely. She wanted to redefine what it meant to be a lawyer in America, to show that the law wasn't just a set of rules. It was a tool for justice, a means to right the wrongs in a world that often tilted in favor of the privileged. Her first few cases were minor, small victories that built her confidence and reputation. But it was when she took on cases involving police brutality and racial discrimination that her career truly took off. She wasn't just a lawyer fighting for clients. She was a warrior standing at the intersection of the legal system and the people who had been crushed by it. Each case she won was another strike against the system that had betrayed her family and so many others like them. By the time Jasmine stood before Judge X in this courtroom, she had already built a name for herself as someone who didn't play by the old rules. She wasn't afraid to stand up, to speak out, to call out the corruption and biases that ran through every facet of the justice system. But this case, it wasn't just another battle. This was her moment, the moment that could define not only her career, but the future of justice in America. But even as she stood there, facing Judge X's dismissive gaze, Jasmine knew that this wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger than one person. It was bigger than a single case. She was representing every person who had been left behind, every person who had been silenced, every person who had been told their voice didn't matter. She wasn't just fighting for a verdict. She was fighting for a change that could ripple across the country and the world. And as much as she had fought to get here, she knew that this was only the beginning. Judge X, with all his power and arrogance, was just another obstacle. And like every obstacle before him, he would fall. Jasmine's eyes hardened as she locked onto Judge X once more, her resolve unshaken. This moment, this trial, was the culmination of everything she had fought for. Every injustice, every hardship, every unfair moment that had shaped her into the lawyer standing before him today. She had the truth on her side. And with that truth, she would do what she had come here to do. She would tear down the walls of corruption, piece by piece, until nothing remained but justice. The tension in the courtroom rises to a fever pitch. Judge X, no longer able to maintain the facade of calm, shifts in his chair, his knuckles white from gripping the gavel. The air between him and Jasmine feels thick, charged with the energy of a battle about to reach its peak. The audience, though silent, can sense the shift. A dramatic crescendo is building, and no one knows how it will resolve. Jasmine remains steadfast, her voice unwavering as she addresses the court once more. The truth, Your Honor, is not just for the privileged few who sit at the top. She begins, her eyes scanning the courtroom, making sure everyone hears her, feels her. It is for the people who have been silenced for too long. It's for those who have fought and lost, time and time again, against a system designed to protect the powerful, not the people. Judge X's lip curls. Ms. Crockett, I'm well aware of your ideals. But this courtroom operates by rules, not by rhetoric. You are here to present evidence, not incite revolution. His tone drips with condescension, an attempt to belittle her every word. But Jasmine does not flinch. I'm not inciting anything, Your Honor. I'm simply showing the truth. You see, justice is not a tool for the elite to use against the weak. It's meant to protect everyone, regardless of their status or wealth. She pauses, watching his face closely, her words hanging heavy in the space between them. But you wouldn't know that, would you? The courtroom falls deathly silent. Judge X's face reddens, a flicker of something between fury and shame crossing his features. This wasn't part of the script he had written in his mind. This wasn't supposed to happen. He clears his throat, attempting to regain control. You seem to be under the impression, Ms. Crockett, that your arguments are somehow groundbreaking. But let me remind you, this case is not about your feelings. It's about facts. It's about law. Is it? Jasmine's voice is quieter now, cutting through the tension with surgical precision. Because if it were about the law, we wouldn't be here in the first place. If it were about facts, Your Honor, we wouldn't have to constantly fight for truth against a system that bends to the will of those with money and power. Judge X slams the gavel down. Enough. You will address the court with respect. His voice rises in an attempt to command the room, but the room doesn't move. Jasmine's response has already taken root in the minds of those present. His attempts to reassert dominance only expose how fragile his control has become. Jasmine leans forward, her eyes locked with his, unwavering. Respect is earned, Judge. And with all due respect, your actions over the years have shown you don't deserve it. She lets her words sink in, every syllable sharp with purpose. You have ruled with arrogance, with bias, and with an unshakable belief that no one can challenge you. Well, here I am, and I'm not going anywhere. Judge X's face twitches, his composure slipping. He had always been the one to call the shots, the one to shut down those who dared to challenge his authority. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't like anyone he had ever faced before. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't intimidated by his gavel or his years of experience. She had the truth, and for the first time in his career, Judge X was faced with a lawyer who wasn't going to let him get away with his games. He tries to mask his frustration, clears his throat once more, and forces a smile, though it doesn't quite reach his eyes. Ms. Crockett, you are treading dangerously close to contempt. I suggest you reconsider your tone before you find yourself in even more trouble than you already are. Jasmine doesn't blink. I'm not here to please you, Judge. I'm here to do what's right. And you can keep hiding behind that gavel. But at the end of the day, truth will always find its way to the surface. The room holds its breath. The lawyers, the jury, even the spectators, all of them are watching this confrontation unfold, captivated by the tension. Jasmine's words have struck a nerve. She's taken the battle beyond the evidence, beyond the case, and into the realm of justice itself. And now, there's no going back. Judge X raises the gavel once more, but he hesitates. For the first time in his career, he finds himself questioning the weight of his own authority. The silence in the courtroom stretches on, a chasm that neither he nor anyone else knows how to cross. The moment hangs in the air, palpable, suspended in time. And then, Jasmine steps forward, her next words slicing through the room like a blade. What happens next, Your Honor, will not be decided by you. It will be decided by the truth. A gasp ripples through the courtroom. Judge X, now visibly shaken, forces himself to compose, but the damage is done. Jasmine Crockett's defiance has struck at the heart of everything he's built. His empire of control, his unquestionable authority. The courtroom is no longer just a place of law, it is a battleground. And the fight, as Jasmine has made clear, is only just beginning. The room is suffocating. Every eye is on Jasmine Crockett, every ear tuned to the words that are about to shatter the silence. The court, the audience, the world, everyone is waiting. Judge X, rattled but not ready to admit defeat, raises his gavel again, his hand shaking just slightly. The authority he once wielded with ease has cracked. It's not just about the case anymore. It's about a reckoning, a moment of truth that no one in the room expected. And in that moment, Jasmine knows she has the power to rewrite everything. She stands, unflinching, her eyes locked on Judge X, the weight of the room's gaze on her shoulders. She's been in this moment before, facing down corruption, facing down the powerful. But this time, it's different. This isn't just a courtroom drama. This is the fight of a generation. Your Honor, Jasmine begins, her voice steady but sharp. You've spent your entire career hiding behind the law, pretending to uphold it, while you've systematically used it as a weapon to silence those who challenge the status quo. Your so-called rulings? They've been nothing more than smoke and mirrors, tricks to keep the powerful in control and everyone else beneath your boot. The courtroom gasps, the tension palpable. The words sting, and Jasmine doesn't relent. She's made her point, but she's not done. You've treated this bench like your personal throne, but you're no king. You're a fraud, a puppet, and I'm not here to let you hide behind your badge any longer. Judge X recoils, the color draining from his face. He slams the gavel down, trying to regain control. Enough, Ms. Crockett. This is your last warning. He snaps, voice trembling with frustration. But Jasmine doesn't back down. If anything, she leans in, her voice cutting through the tension like a hot knife. It's not about what you say anymore, Judge. It's about what's been exposed. The truth that no one can ignore anymore. You're a man who's built his career on bending the rules, on turning justice into a game where only the powerful win. But guess what? She pauses for a moment, the courtroom hanging on every word. The game's over. The silence that follows is deafening. You could hear a pin drop as the weight of her words settles in. Judge X's face twitches, his earlier composure shattered. He opens his mouth to speak, but no words come. He's defeated, standing there in front of the courtroom like a puppet whose strings have been cut. Jasmine doesn't give him the chance to recover. She's already moved on, her eyes locked on the jury, on the people who've been watching this drama unfold. The system isn't broken because of the people, Your Honor, she says, voice ringing with conviction. It's broken because of the people like you. People who see themselves as above the law. People who think their power gives them the right to manipulate justice for their own benefit. You're not just a judge, you're a liar, and your lies have cost this country more than you'll ever admit. She turns to the jury, her gaze intense. This is the truth you've been waiting for. This is the truth you were promised when you swore an oath to uphold justice. It's time for you to stand with the people, for the people. It's time for you to take the power back. The courtroom is still, each person holding their breath. Judge X, now sweating and pale, opens his mouth again, but no sound comes out. He's been completely disarmed. His arrogance, his years of unchecked power, his reputation, all of it is crumbling right before him. His eyes dart to the jury, searching for support, but they remain steadfast, their eyes not on him, but on Jasmine. Do you want to know what happens next, Judge? Jasmine continues, her tone now deadly calm. What happens next is that we change the system. What happens next is that the people win. What happens next is that your reign of corruption ends. Because no matter how many gavel strikes you make, no matter how many rules you bend, truth is a force that can't be stopped. The audience, those sitting behind the walls of this courtroom, begins to stir. There's a buzz now, a hum of something electric filling the air. It's as if they've been waiting for this moment their entire lives, for someone, anyone, to finally stand up to the very system that's been stacked against them. The crowd's collective energy swells, the murmurs growing louder. Even those who might have initially been skeptical of Jasmine's approach are now nodding, shifting in their seats. Her words have landed like a bombshell, and they're spreading outwards like wildfire, infecting everyone in the room with the idea of a new kind of justice. Justice not defined by privilege, but by truth and equality. Judge X, realizing the control he once had is slipping away, slams the gavel down once more, but this time, it's out of desperation. Order. I will not tolerate this. But the gavel is a weak weapon now, one that holds no power in the face of the storm Jasmine has unleashed. The room falls into chaos. Whispers, murmurs, gasps, as the reality of the situation sinks in. Jasmine Crockett has won. The battle is over. The jury, the court, and the world are now on Jasmine's side. There's no going back for Judge X, no matter how hard he tries. The moment has passed the point of no return. Jasmine, calm and resolute, stands tall, watching as the courtroom shifts beneath her. The room grows eerily quiet as Jasmine takes her seat, every eye now on the judge, who is no longer in control. The gavel is powerless in his hand. And with one final glance at the jury, Jasmine delivers the words that seal the fate of the case. This isn't just my fight, Your Honor. It's everyone's. And now we're going to win. And with that, she sits back, letting the moment linger. The courtroom waits, breathless, for what will happen next. The moment Jasmine Crockett spoke those final words, a wave of energy rippled through the courtroom. It wasn't just the quiet that followed her mic drop moment. It was the sense of a turning point. A revolution, silent yet profound, had taken place. In that moment, Judge X lost not just the case, but his grasp on the very system he had spent decades manipulating. Jasmine had exposed him for what he was, a fraud, and the truth, as she promised, could no longer be silenced. It wasn't long before the news outlets picked up the story. Within hours, the courtroom drama was splashed across every major news platform. Social media exploded with hashtags like hashtag Justice for the People, hashtag Exposing the Corruption, and hashtag Crockett takes down the judge. The very name Jasmine Crockett began trending nationwide. The powerful imagery of her, standing resolute, eyes locked on Judge X as he crumbled, was too compelling to ignore. Clips of her words were shared millions of times, each retweet and repost intensifying the storm that had been unleashed. In homes across the country, viewers who had never heard of Jasmine Crockett before now found themselves glued to their screens. She wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was a hero, a symbol of resistance against a broken system. People were captivated by her courage, by her refusal to back down, by her fearless pursuit of justice. For many, Jasmine became a beacon of hope in a world that often felt stacked against them. Celebrities, Influencers and activists joined the chorus of praise, sharing their support for Jasmine's stand. The hashtag Crockett for Change surged in popularity, with prominent figures like Selena Gomez, LeBron James, and Bernice King tweeting their admiration. On platforms like TikTok and Instagram, viral videos of Jasmine's confrontation with Judge X spread like wildfire, each clip gaining thousands of likes, shares, and comments. Even people who had once been skeptical of the legal system were now rethinking everything. Jasmine had done what many thought was impossible. She had taken on the system and won. But it wasn't just the public that was affected. Inside the political and legal circles, the ripples were just as significant. Prominent lawmakers and legal scholars began speaking out in defense of Jasmine. Some praised her for her unyielding integrity, while others questioned how the system had allowed someone like Judge X to hold so much power for so long. Conversations on legal ethics and judicial reform quickly became a trending topic across news panels and think pieces. And then there was the reaction from the legal community. Jasmine's peers, who had watched her rise from a young law student with a fire in her belly to a powerhouse in the courtroom, couldn't help but stand in awe. Many had always believed she was capable of great things, but even they were stunned by how quickly she had dismantled the very foundation Judge X had built over the years. Legal blogs and forums buzzed with discussions of the case, with commentators marveling at how she had used the law, not as a tool to twist or bend, but as a weapon for truth and justice. But Judge X? His fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. News outlets and legal analysts dissected his every past ruling, revisiting the cases where his biases had been clear. The cracks that Jasmine had exposed were now a gaping chasm. He was no longer just an out-of-touch judge. He was a symbol of everything wrong with a system that allowed people to hide behind power. Calls for his resignation flooded social media and the public, and even within the judicial community, his reputation was left in tatters. The board overseeing judicial conduct launched an investigation into his rulings, and many wondered if his career, already stained by the events in the courtroom, would survive. Even the courtroom staff, who had once silently followed his orders, now found themselves questioning their role in the system. Some of the bailiffs, attorneys, and clerks had begun to quietly speak out about the systemic issues they had long ignored. Jasmine had sparked something within them, a new wave of awareness. They too had witnessed the flaws of the system up close, and now, as the country watched Judge X's downfall unfold, they realized they could no longer stay silent. The story wasn't just about a courtroom showdown. It was about something much bigger. It was a rallying cry for those who had long been disillusioned with a system that favored the rich and powerful. Jasmine Crockett had shown the world that it was possible to stand up, speak out, and make a difference. And the aftermath of her victory proved that when truth rises to the surface, nothing, no amount of power, no amount of influence, could suppress it forever. But the true impact of Jasmine's stand would be felt in the months and years to come. She had sparked a movement. Protests and rallies began to pop up across the nation, with people coming together to demand judicial reform, greater accountability for those in power, and a renewed commitment to fairness and equality in the legal system. Jasmine, once just a lawyer fighting for her clients, had become the face of a new era of activism, one that was unapologetically bold, fiercely committed to truth, and unafraid to challenge the entrenched powers that be. As the months passed, Jasmine's name continued to echo through the halls of justice. Her victory had ignited a fire that could not be extinguished. And though the case had been settled, the battle for real, lasting change was far from over. For Jasmine Crockett, this was just the beginning. She had taken on one corrupt figure in a broken system, but there were many more to challenge, many more to expose, and many more to fight for. The world was watching, and Jasmine was just getting started. The courtroom drama had come to a close, but the echoes of what had transpired lingered long after the gavel fell. Jasmine Crockett had stood tall in the face of corruption, in the face of power, and she had emerged victorious. Yet, as she walked out of the courtroom, her victory was not just for her or the people in that room. It was for something larger, something that transcended the case at hand. It was a victory for truth, a victory for every voice that had ever been silenced. Jasmine had always known that justice wasn't just about winning cases. It was about the fight for something bigger. It was about ensuring that the law wasn't something to be twisted and used against the powerless, but a tool for protecting the vulnerable, the oppressed, and the forgotten. She knew that the moment she took on Judge X, it wasn't just about one man. It was about the system. It was about every individual who had been let down by that system. Every person who had seen their hopes dashed because the scales of justice had been tipped in favor of the rich, the powerful, and the untouchable. But as much as her victory felt like a triumph over one corrupt figure, it was also a reminder of how much work remained to be done. The fight for justice wasn't over. It couldn't be. Jasmine wasn't just fighting for a verdict. She was fighting to shift the very paradigm of a system that had been broken for generations. The path she had carved, while powerful, was only the first step in what would be a much longer journey. Her words, those piercing truths that had resonated throughout the courtroom, weren't just to expose Judge X's corruption. They were to remind every single person watching that they had the power to challenge injustice. They had the power to demand more. And Jasmine knew that as much as the public's eye was on her now, it wouldn't be long before the system fought back, tried to bury the voices that challenged its authority. But Jasmine was ready. She always had been, because the truth, like justice, had a way of coming to light, no matter how many walls you built around it. She had become more than just a lawyer. She had become a symbol, a beacon for those who believed that real change was possible, that the systems of power could be reshaped, that the impossible could be achieved. But she also knew that symbols, however strong, were never enough on their own. It was the actions, the daily struggles, the sacrifices of countless individuals that would bring real change. It would take all of them working together to create a system that worked for everyone, not just the privileged few. Jasmine's victory had ignited a fire that burned bright in the hearts of people everywhere. From the streets to the boardrooms, from the smallest town halls to the grandest courts, the conversation was shifting. The walls of the old, corrupt system were starting to crumble piece by piece. And though Jasmine knew this was just the beginning, she also knew that what she had accomplished was something historic. A victory for the people. A victory for truth. A victory for justice. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles, more setbacks, more challenges. But Jasmine had already proven that one person, armed with nothing more than the truth and a willingness to fight for what was right, could change the course of history. She had shown the world that justice wasn't a mere concept. It was a living, breathing force that demanded action, that required courage, and that could never be allowed to fade into complacency. Jasmine walked out of that courtroom not as a lone warrior, but as part of a movement that was growing by the day, fueled by the desire for something better, something fairer. A movement that knew no borders, no limits, and no boundaries. It was a movement that knew that true justice would never be handed to them. It would always have to be fought for. As the world watched her walk out into the light, one thing was clear. The fight was far from over, but Jasmine Crockett had already set the stage for a new era of justice. One where truth would reign, and no one, no matter how powerful, could ever escape its reach. And for everyone who had been watching, for everyone who had been waiting, there was a message that resonated deep in their hearts. This fight is ours, and we will win. The room fell silent as Jasmine disappeared into the halls of history. The battle for justice had just begun. The dust has settled. The courtroom may have gone silent, but the impact of Jasmine Crockett's words continues to ripple outwards, reaching hearts and minds across the nation. What started as a single stand for truth has ignited a movement, one that will challenge the very foundations of a system built to protect the powerful. Jasmine's fight, though, is far from over. This is just the beginning. The victory that Jasmine secured in that courtroom, though monumental, is only a chapter in the fight for justice that remains ahead. The battle for accountability, for transparency, for fairness. These are the battles that will shape the future. And Jasmine knows that she can't do this alone. She needs every voice, every hand raised in support of change. The truth she spoke in that courtroom belongs to all of us, but it will only be realized if we stand together. So now, it's your turn. Jasmine's victory isn't just hers. It's yours too. It's the victory of every person who has ever felt silenced, every person who has fought for something better, every person who believes in the power of justice to break down the walls of oppression. Join the movement. Stand up. Speak out. Share this story. Share Jasmine's fight, and let it be a reminder that when we stand together, the truth cannot be ignored. Subscribe to stay updated. Share this video with everyone who believes in change. And let's continue to push for the justice we all deserve. This is just the beginning. Let's make sure it's a beginning we never forget. Together, we can rebuild the system. Together, we can make history. The fight for justice starts now, and you can be part of it.